And then hold on.
Okay, we got it. We made it. Hey, Mike.
Okay, hey,
Cole,
how's it
Michael. Huh.
going? Oh,
I
it's
just
been
have
so long you
such an
don't remember. I mean, either work.
I
I don't.
yeah, yeah. But don't be a pushover though.
I mean, it doesn't actually matter to me. If it did,
Yeah.
I'd probably be
Uh,
more insistent.
yeah. So, but yeah, long time no see.
I know. That's crazy.
I mean,
Been like 3 weeks,
it's
I think.
3 weeks. And it's easy, it's funny when you get out of the habit of doing something, um, it's really easy to kind of not think about it.
Yeah, it's true.
And it's dangerous because then all of a sudden what was going very well can just disappear.
It just totally loses momentum in some ways, right?
Yeah.
But,
So
things
let's
have gotten.
let's not let that happen again.
Yeah, I know. Well, it got complicated, right? Because you were traveling, and I mean, Easter happened, and there were just lots of moving
Yeah,
parts. But yeah.
and all that stuff. My parents were over for the first time since COVID, so
Oh,
yeah, it was a good time, but it yeah, how was your vacation time? Did you have any vacation? I mean,
kind
yeah.
of, not really. I mean, it's uh, in at Dal, no, we were still doing stuff. I
Okay.
think that Good Friday was a day off, and at the other school that I teach at the music school in town as well, and they were open on the days that I teach there. So yeah,
No,
not
no
really.
break.
Not really, no.
One of my favorite things about living in Germany is that the music teaching system is kind of tied into the school vacation system,
Right, yeah.
typically. So that means that whenever the schools close down, like then we are also closed. And so this is my favorite stretch of the year because you get 2 weeks off for Easter, and then there's 2 weeks off for Pentecost.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't
So
know.
like, and then basically the way that the thing is structured over here, they don't get a long break. Like they go to school in July,
Oh,
but they distribute those 4 weeks or like throughout the year. So like you get a week in November, you get a week in February, you get 2 weeks for Easter, 2 weeks for Pentecost, and then like it's just really it's always like 6 weeks away. There's always like a bubble of space, and
I somehow find that better. You know, when we
it's
get off for like I remember, summer vacation was like 3 months long when we were kids. And I just like,
yeah.
my brain just kind of atrophied through that period. Like I would just not remember anything when I got back to school in September.
Absolutely. I mean, it was horrible. But my mom, who was a elementary school or primary school teacher, she always used to say that. She was like, we spend the first 2 months getting the kids like back to where they were like
Yeah.
in June. I mean, that might be not bad, but a certain amount of time to do that, and then you're basically on Christmas, and then it's really
Yeah,
hard to kind
exactly.
of get any, you know.
Exactly.
And no, I like this system. Now the problem with this system is that with music stuff, kids then are always kind of in this kind of half state of like continuance sometimes um depending on the structure of what we give them. And so
Right.
that's what I've been using Discord for in my studio, is to try and bridge those vacation gaps so that like even if we don't see each other, encourage them to keep posting videos because I think that's worthwhile. And then I can offer some comments if they have a question about a fingering or about a problem. Those are little quick fixes.
Exactly. And other,
And there's no
your
reason.
other students can too, can input things.
Yeah.
You guys can just kind of talk to each other, which is great.
Yeah. And it just to stay in touch and just to kind of, and that's, been working very well. For those who take part in it, it's really hard to kind of pull people onto the platform.
Yeah.
Um, People like you, Michael, I
I,
think.
I still have it. I mean, yeah, to be fair, in my defense, my computer is ancient, and any new app is going to basically make it sound like it's going to catch on fire. So
Well, that
I had to delete
I
a bunch of things. Anyways.
well, that's a weak excuse.
I actually just barely have anything on my computer at this point. I can run one app at one time. Zoom is on right now, and this is
Yeah.
my one. This is my one thing.
Okay.
But I mean, I should.
Um,
Yeah, I need to download it again.
well, yeah, I've started this project now, and there's a couple of teachers in on it, and I've taken two of my students, and I've asked each teacher, right, there's like two teachers, to put one or two of their students in this group, and it's an international thing to see if we can get these guys to mix and mingle and post videos. Actually, just before I came to talk to you, this one kid who I've never met before, it's a student of somebody else. He was working on the Dave Brubeck Blue Rondo a la Turk.
Okay, yeah.
And so, he'll post a little video of him. Hey, I learned this piece because I saw it on the YouTube. And then I was like, oh, that sounds great. And then I can give him a little suggestion about something different to think about with it, like how to vary the texture or a finger idea. And I think that's cool. And I like to think that he appreciates that and that the other teacher appreciates that. And then the other students can start to hear each other doing these things and to engage and to do, yeah, I like that. I think that's very important.
You know, fun.
And
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
sorry,
Sorry. No, you finish your story.
I think the story's over.
I was gonna just say, funnily enough, my first master's research project was on trying to build an online forum or online community for music teaching, and seeing how that would maybe be able to tie into piano lessons, because my argument was that we do everything alone as pianists, and we never talk to anybody. You know, at least if you played the violin, you'd have orchestra, you'd have other people to hang out with, you'd have Suzuki, right? And you'd have these
Yeah,
groups to always be able to socialize with. And then, you know, it's hard. I think when you're young, and certainly when I was young, it's hard to see the point of doing piano lessons, because you just go to your lesson, you come home, you practice, and everything is just totally independent almost, other than your interaction with your teacher and the, one or two recitals or Kiwanis classes that you might play every year.
yeah, and absolutely. You see, and that's exactly the thing. Like we're always behind closed doors, and and if you don't, you have to be one of the very lucky few to actually be making good progress in the lessons, if that makes sense. Like, it depends on the situation, but you know what I mean? Like, it's easy that if you don't have a good momentum and if you don't feel good about how you're playing and how you're bringing things to the lesson, then it's going to be like not such an enjoyable experience because you have this thing. But if you have this viewpoint into others, their own,
Yeah.
you get to see the stages of their progress and you realize it's not unlike your own. That would help simulate this
You
orchestral
also just
kind of
have no
vibe.
point of reference, right? And I think that
Yeah.
that's like it's an interesting phenomenon, because I remember in my second year of my undergrad, I went to my first music festival. I went to Orford, and I was in the same class with Charles Richard Hamelin and like a bunch of other people. Like we were all in the same class, and I just remember hearing them play, and I was like, wow, these guys are all my age, and I, have a lot of work to do. I was just so floored that, like, people around my age were at the level that they were at. And
Mhm.
um, it was just like a very humbling
Which,
experience. But when you don't, sorry, when you don't really have, when I didn't feel like I really had that growing up, in terms of like seeing other people and seeing what they were doing and how they were active in music, that it just was like a huge, like my mind was blown when I finally got to see it.
yeah,
Yeah,
and you go there though, and then you're with an elite kind of a group, which can be both motivating and depressing, right?
exactly.
And then
You did both. Yeah.
and it can do both,
Yeah.
and if of course like it's also, but it's amazing to see kind of what's going on, how things are going on, especially when you come from a place where there's not a lot of opportunity for that. And for for our purposes, well, for my purposes, it's just to kind of just to let everybody know that like we're all working on this in little bits, and even if, because what you do see now a lot on YouTube, which we didn't have growing up, you see these like little 8-year-olds who can just play Rock 3 or something stupid,
Yeah.
like people who are just like tearing it apart, and then you feel like an idiot because you're like, oh my god, like I'm like 16 or 15 and I can hardly play whatever because of whatever.
Exactly.
And you're comparing yourself to these virtuoso videos, or you have these like piano covers and you have these people playing like, pop tunes, and it's kind of, like it's not virtuosic, but it sounds big to like these teenagers, and they still feel years away from that. But like that's what's, and they, of course, the videos look amazing because they got this amazing production and people figured it out, and you can make it sound awesome, and you can edit it, and you can do all this stuff. But of course, when you're just a piano person in your lesson, you're like, geez, like that's like, you feel like it's so depressing,
Yeah.
especially on a community level. And to try and counter that, well, let's, take the filters off for a second and just see how we're all learning and progressing at our paces. And of course, there are some who are better and worse,
Mhm.
but it's way more kind of relatable than what we get to see, because like we didn't have to deal with that, like unless we went off to big master classes and saw those
Yeah,
guys. But
exactly.
like um even now you can stream that stuff, you can stream like competitions and workshops, and
Yeah,
you can
totally.
see, oh my god, these guys are really great. But you don't really ever get to see people kind of sucking and practicing. But like
But that's
and
like
not
that's like
suck isn't a
90% of what's going on, you know? It's like
it's
the
there's
iceberg.
there's
It's like
so
all
much stuff that's just, it's just so untransparent. Yeah. And just to bring that more to the front, and I say suck in a funny way, but and it doesn't matter, it's just like that is the process. And I think it would inspire a lot of more people who like music and are doing this, but are kind of struggling with finding meaning and stuff. um to see that, like, oh, okay, it's just like this. And then when you see somebody who's been at it for 4 or 5 years, dedicated to it, and has somehow gotten past that hump,
yeah.
and you realize it's attainable, like they're the same as me. And especially if we're able to archive the videos from like where it came from. Like I had this kid
Yeah.
on Discord now, and like well, the father posts the videos, he's like 7 8, um and he started this year. And it starts with playing one note, and now he's playing two hands, and we can progress, we can follow that progression, with some things with mistakes, some things with uneven this or whatever, up until now a year later. And when it's in 5 years, if he keeps up with it, he's going to be pretty good. And so then somebody else will be able to see, okay, it took that long for that person. And of course, the line's not the same for everybody, but um, it helps to demystify that process. And where can you see that on YouTube? I mean, not really.
No, nowhere really. And this kind of brings me to I think with the thing with music that's really tricky is that a lot of these progressions are very ill-defined, right? You don't notice that you're getting better. You just do
Yeah.
this every week, and then eventually you do end up at some kind of fluency, right? And I was thinking, so like one of my very close friends is a very avid rock climber. He's opening a climbing gym in St. John's, and he
Daniel?
coaches. Yeah, Daniel.
Yeah, cool.
Oh, you know Daniel. Okay, cool.
I know his, yeah,
Oh,
I,
I guess you went
yes,
to school
Daniel
with.
Alacock.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
I went
right.
to school
Anyway,
with Marianne. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Anyways, yeah. So Daniel's opening a climbing gym. We were talking about because he's coaching. He coaches a lot of teenagers in climbing, uh, and he was saying how the thing with climbing, at least, is that failure is built into the activity itself, right? You, if you are climbing a wall at a certain grade, maybe you don't get to the top, but you kind of work towards doing that and getting closer to that. Maybe I'm misrepresenting because I don't necessarily understand that much about climbing, but the fact that you have different grades, you have a clear goal in mind, which is to get to a certain point, um, it makes somehow the process seem more palatable in a way because things actually do seem clear. Your goal seems clear. But with music, I don't, it's hard to really say what getting better actually means.
100%.
Yeah.
Because usually when you get better, you realize how much worse you are. Like, it's like this, like, and but when you climb a rock, when you climb a wall, you get to the top, you win, like you've done it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I love the rock climbing parallel, like that movie Free Solo with
Yeah.
Alex Honnold.
Yeah. That
Like
was great.
I wanted that to be required reading for all of my students, or required watching, because like it's just this amazing power of mastery and learning of a skill applied to this insane sport,
And
which is
years in the
so cool.
making too, right? Years of
Yeah,
training, and kind of
years of
talking
training. Like,
about
I mean, that guy studied it for years, and he's not just a daredevil. Like, he knew it, and he practiced it, and he mastered it. And yeah, and like what I try to do with the students when they come and they play something, and then all of a sudden they can do this thing that they could never do before. Like, I'm like, you need to not forget that last week you couldn't do this. Now you don't notice now that you can do this,
yeah.
but be aware of like that you've done that. And of course, an adult can kind of appreciate that. But a younger person, yeah, when the goal is like 4 or 5 years in the future, and I had to, this is the issue. Like a kid starts, they love the music, and after a year, they like feel like, oh my god, like they don't realize that, like even though they're getting better, but it's just like it's so far in the future. An 8-year-old can't really um, project where they're going to get, and that's what the parent needs to kind of step in and like say, don't allow them to give up, because of course they'll want to, but once they get past these certain lulls, like, and using old videos to compare yourself and hear against that, but just, yeah, because like once you can do something, it feels like you could always do it, and you're not standing on top of a wall at the end. And then of course sometimes it might not work every time, so like then you have that kind of like it's a slippery fish.
But I think that like I think the idea of learning, and this is maybe something I think this is something that I do talk to a lot of my students about, and something that I think about a lot is failing. Is failure is kind of like that is inherent in the learning process. Even even at the undergrad or university level, having to perform a concert, the first hour long recital I had to play was what, in third or fourth year at the and having to do that was a big milestone at the time. And there's lots of performances that I've had since then where I don't feel very good about them, but navigating that process is a part of the process. And you get closer and closer to something that you are maybe more satisfied with just by having to go through that. And I think that actually that's something that took me a long time to realize too, is that you just need to practice performing to get really good at performing. And that also means having to put yourself out there on stage in public and you know incur a risk, maybe make a
Yeah,
mistake, forget something.
and well, for sure, and it's always going to be taking risks and stuff is what kind of makes a lot of the music really exciting as well.
Yeah,
And um I think a big part of that, like what I've heard, people who are like A level performers, like the guys, like people like tripping off and stuff. And from what I've heard from some folks, is that like they go around and they play like 50 house concerts before they play their program
yeah,
on the stage.
exactly.
And so even at those high advanced levels, like there's still a lot of preparation concerts before the actual concerts. And then for most of us or whatever, we often have to do a show or a gig, and we're lucky if we can play it through for a person or two people beforehand. But like to go through a whole like tour of like stuff like that to kind of get, it goes to speak for how much of a process that is.
That is a really good point too. And even in our degree programs and stuff, you have the big recital that you do annually, right? In a performance program, you do your big recital annually. And I remember being maybe 20 and listening to, I think the live streams of the Chopin competition happened or started happening around 2010. And I remember listening to some of those, the videos were posted. Actually, it wasn't a live stream, but the videos were uploaded to YouTube. And I remember listening to some of these people play and just being like, wow, okay, like, um, 2010, what was that? That was the year that I think, like, no, that was 2005, that year that, like, Rafał Blakash won the competition. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Polish guy.
uh, okay. Yeah,
But anyways, like,
yeah.
it's just like an amazing recording. Anyways, and like just listening to all these people play very solidly and like just know their way around all of this stuff. And I didn't realize until I really got to grad school that, some of these people have been playing their concert and their competition repertoire for like a decade. They've played it
Yeah.
so like they have it is part of them. It's like lived with them for a long time. I just thought everyone was playing everything for the first time on stage and just being super solid. I had no idea.
Yeah. Well, I mean, why would you? I mean, how do we, again, it's not a transparent process. You'd think that we would have heard about that somehow in our lessons, in our preparing for things.
Yeah.
But, not being on that circuit and being removed, like, I don't even know if our teachers would have known really, like, to the extent, well, maybe, I mean, some would.
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
But
they
I
all,
mean,
yeah, did competitions too,
I,
surely, but you don't
but I
think
mean, at
about it.
that level, like there's difference between like playing like the Kiwanis Festival and then like the Tchaikovsky competition,
Yeah,
like
a little difference.
you
Yeah.
know, so slight difference. I mean, in that the Kiwanis is way more prestigious than St.
Yeah,
John's.
exactly.
Yeah.
Much more competitive.
Yeah. So yeah,
But I mean, it
cool.
was like lots of epiphanies over the years, just on based because of not being able to see what this process was. It was all kind of private or hidden, and then you realize, like, no, like these people have been preparing for years. They take, even if you think of like orchestral auditions, for example, some people take an entire year. They quit everything they're doing just to prepare 15 minutes worth of excerpts. It's probably more than 15 minutes, but they prepare all of their excerpts for these things to be as like ready as possible for some of these symphony auditions. You think of like all these big American symphonies, or even like,
Yeah,
I don't know what the process is like for
yeah, something like that.
but something like that.
It would be like the last thing in the world I would ever do. Oh my god, I would not be an orchestral musician. I just it's way too much. Ugh. Those guys, they're heroes for doing good for them, but I mean, I could never
I mean, it's a
pull that.
crazy amount of pressure if you really think about it, especially if you're at a like a major orchestra.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Um, but okay, so back in your master's degree, you had done this thesis or whatever. So what came of it? What why did it? Was it a thesis? Did you actually test it out? Did you put it into
Yeah,
practice?
I tested it out. I kind of tried to recruit a bunch of teachers and studios to see if they would all come online and do these things. And this was, before the days of Discord, so I had
Yeah,
to create my own forum and try to find goals and other things to do. But I think also maybe it works. Maybe it works better in your studio because I assume your students know each other. I think that was probably the biggest obstacle that I had. Like the students didn't really know each other. They also didn't really know me. There was really no incentive for them to be on this forum at all. And I did get some data, and some kids really did enjoy it. Some students did, but I think ultimately there was nothing really holding them or keeping them there. There's nothing for them to like really engage with other than to like do these um, these random objectives that I would give them and maybe have a chat with other students. But yeah, I mean, there was just like, yeah, uh, there was nothing to kind of keep it going after I was like finished all of my research, my data collection and stuff. But that was, I think, the big obstacle.
yeah, like the studio. Well, the thing is, the kids don't know each other. I mean, some know each other if there's some who are the same age, but and some have gotten to know each other more because of the Discord. Because the ones who've gotten involved in like posting videos of themselves learning and practicing, they've then come together outside of that to meet in real life or to
Right.
even practice together at some points. But that would never have happened had there not been a place for them to come together and meet each other and to kind of share it because they come from different, you know, different backgrounds, totally different kinds of people, and different age groups, different jobs, different interests, and then they're united by this thing. They would never talk to each other on the street walking past, but then this brought them together, and it's really cool. And so I'm trying to get the kids and stuff onto it, and trying to give them a reason to do it. Um, and this other project, I have this like the Pew International Piano Project, where I taking then from my so my studio is what 30 35 students ish or so, and maybe 12 of them are active on Discord, maybe 8 to 12. And a few months ago, I was like, okay, you gotta post one thing on Discord every week, or I'm gonna cut you from the studio. And
Wow.
and I was like, but my point was like, you can literally play a chord and put that video on. It's like less than a second long. I don't care. Like, atomic principles, start from the smallest thing and go from there. And it kind of worked. I had to kind of get really mad at some of my students for like a few weeks in a row when they didn't do it. I was like, it's such a small threshold. It's not even practicing. It's just, trying to, and they're like, well, I got this and that. It's like, it doesn't matter. Like it takes 0 seconds. I'm not telling you to play a page of anything. It can be like nothing. It's just like, yeah. And it didn't work. And I did, and then it was an empty threat. Like I didn't boot them from the studio. Although I would love to be able to enact that, because I think also it would help, wake some people up to like, hey, like maybe there's a little bit more you can do to be involved somehow. And I get like, I don't want to just bring another app on. I don't like integration of technology. I mean, I had this
Yeah.
studio. The idea is that it's the space, but in the interest of building a small community based around this kind of you know, music or something, um, some way of connecting to get rid of those walls in some way and just get a little bit engaged. So I have this international community now. I've got, like I said, I took from my 10 active Discord people, I've taken two of the younger ones, and I said like, hey, you guys are about junior high school level, and I'm gonna get other junior high school people from around the world, so like some in New York or Canada or whatever, and then maybe they're teachers, and very small numbers so we can make sure that they stay active and see if we can like get them to share things with each other. And then as that they become active with each other, we can throw in one other student and then one other thing. And then slowly you'd have this active kernel that kind of develops. And again, it's not about becoming amazing, or it's just to make some kind of connection, some kind of, you know, because that's one thing that AI cannot take away. Although AI can be a very good company sometimes, but like, real human to human contact is something that is really valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's I think it's terrific. Certainly, I think a Discord server is a good way of doing it, and I think actually when I did my that was my first year master's, so it's probably a decade ago by now. Yeah, it was a decade ago, a long time. But
We're so old.
I know, but it was Discord. I don't think it existed back then, and I think that even trying to recruit those students to do this online forum, it took it took a lot of parental work to do
Yeah.
it because the kids didn't really navigate uh, computers as maybe they do now. It's certainly if they have a device like a cell phone, a smartphone, or a tablet or something. I think the barrier to entry is just much less than having to like get on their computer and do all this stuff. And I think presumably a lot of these kids already have Discord servers for other communities, so it's kind of baked into something that they do. But yeah, I just don't think a lot of this tech or the availability of software wasn't necessarily there, or I don't know. I think
Yeah. No, totally. It wasn't back then, and it hardly is now. And of course, parents are so sick of different like um, apps for different this and that. And I get it. Like, if I had two or three kids and they all had to do this, and then I had my work stuff, and then whatever. I mean, I find myself like to have enough is enough. But if I had the ability to make a Pew app, I would. And I would like have like the thing. Anybody who's a member of the studio has this app, and everything to do with it is there. And this basically is that, except that it's a different app that some of them might already have. but it's definitely not easy, especially when you talk about little kids, because they'll need the parents to take the videos for them and this and that. And there's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah. And frankly,
Um,
I think also just parents are much more overworked. I feel like now. I think they're
totally.
stretched very thin, and I totally understand when things just kind of fall by the wayside every week.
I 100% understand. And so, like, I don't want to be too pushy, and that's why not everybody is on there. But at the same time, I want the community to develop. I want to be able to move this thing forward because I've been here for 8 years now. And
Oh no way.
like doing this studio, I've been in Germany for longer, but we've Pew is like in its 8th year. We started in 2015.
Wow.
And like then the before the pandemic, I started making the move to get people online. So 2018, I dedicated 1 week of the month to just online teaching, which is asynchronous stuff. And to get them, because I also think that it's very valuable for students to make a video themselves and watch it, especially if it's being commented on by the teacher, because they can see themselves objectively, which you can't do in the actual lesson. And also the parents can also get involved if they want to, but again, like most of them can't be involved. I mean, over here, both parents often are working,
Hmm.
and often there's more than one kid, and it's just hard. And then the pandemic came and everything was online. And then when the pandemic was over, then I had to get rid of online because people were just so sick of things. So I put the apps and stuff aside for a bit. And now the last year or so, I've kind of taken it on again and say, well, look, this is an element that I think is really important because, you know, email lists are ineffective. Um, email is because you don't get a lot of engagement on them typically. Um, WhatsApp groups are better. So I started a WhatsApp group to announce like events and stuff. But to have like a bulletin board that kind of gets access and read, which is just, one extracurricular activity for a lot of these guys, like that's the place that at least, if an email gets buried, it can get deleted, it can get locked in spam or whatever. But if something here gets pushed, like it'll still be in the history of the chat.
Right.
So that's my thinking there, is that like at least there's a place that they can kind of go and review and catch up.
Right. No, it's true.
And
Yeah.
and at the same time, it can be the same place where people can share their practice or where they can talk about what they are reading right now. A lot of my students, like we're doing this, like I read this book about some philosophy, or it doesn't have to be music, and then it, people what music. What I had one couple of months where I said, hey, once a week, everybody just put a song that you're listening to into the thing. We can, you get suggestions of songs from other people or whatever, and then it's a cool way to segment and to build a thing, but of course it can also be overwhelming.
Do you have a
It's
reading?
great for those who, sorry,
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I thought.
I say it's great for the students who are actually really interested in get, get, getting a lot out, because you know you and I, like, we have, I think, good expertise to give, and we have good resources of people who want to learn this stuff. We're a good resource for them. But most students barely scrape the surface of what we can give them, because it's just whatever happens in the lesson, they go. But so much stuff are just bigger ideas that kind of get, that ones that we're still working on ourselves, like, that we get to share with them. But it's not like a short transaction, it's a longer transaction. And those are the things that are where the real value can lie. But the person has to really want
Of
to
course.
access it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes people don't know that it exists until they've done it, and it's this kind of like catch-22 thing of like, once you're in it, it's okay, but until you get in it, there's no reason to get into it. And so I think that's what a catch-22 is. I haven't read that book. And what were you going to say?
Do you have a reading list for your studio, or do you just have
I've
readings that you do? And
Well, like, if I'm reading a book, and I do, like, in the Discord channel, there's like a reading list area. So like, there's some to do just with music, some to do with learning, some to do with like mindset and like how learning works. A lot of like learn, like, because
yeah,
there's so many crappy brain books, that talk about like talent or this or whatever. And there's so much garbage out there, and so much fluff. But I still, at the same time, am interested in these kind because there are gems out there which really help you focus and get some direction. And so if I find I have one of those, then I'll put it there. So there's a list in that thing that's like maybe 25 books long or so, that people can then. And I have a library here, so people can
Cool.
borrow it and bring it back. And
Oh, that's
but
great.
most people, yeah. But I like this. I have this really nice group of adult students right now. They all like to read, and they're all typically just like so. A book will often circle around like these five or six people.
I'll throw a recommendation in too into the
Oh
pot
yeah,
if you'd like. It's not a book actually. There's a course. I think it's on Coursera. It's called Learning How to Learn, and it goes through all of the science
yeah.
of
That
learning
sounds
and
cool.
how learning happens, how those processes happen in your brain. Anyways, I wish that was something that I had watched earlier than I did. I watched it maybe 5 or 6 years ago, but I wish I had seen it when I was a teenager too, because I think it was, I don't know, it's very insightful just to understand what your brain is actually doing in these processes and to understand how that works, what how you're kind of consolidating information. And it's not very long. These videos aren't very long. It's super engaging. The teachers are really cool.
That's really cool. I'd love to see that because I've got a book. It's like a university psychology textbook, and it says "Learning to Learn," and like stuff about that.
Yeah.
But it's way more like university psych based, and so like I'll like trudge through this stuff and say, "Oh, okay, that's neat and cool," but like I'm like dying doing it. So if there's like a series like that,
Yeah.
I'm very interested into checking it out. So send
Right,
me
right.
that link, and then I'll post it in the podcast notes,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
um, for anybody else. But I'll definitely also add it into the Discord thing on your recommendation because I I love well produced stuff like that. And there's so many cool nuggets of information that definitely you can apply them in some way or other.
Yeah.
And often it's an idea or a framework, a point of reference shifts, not like a fingering or whatever. It's just a way of thinking
Hmm.
that makes the biggest gains in what we're doing, I think.
Shift in thinking. Yeah. That was my dissertation.
Hey, you should share your dissertation.
So it was on, I mean, you might have read already Carol Dweck's work in educational psychology. She coined the terms incremental entity or incremental and entity theory, and then they later got retermed as growth and fixed mindsets.
Yes, I have the mindset book, which is about that. Is that the same
That's
person?
Carol Dweck. Yeah. If it's called
Yeah.
mindset,
Okay.
that's the Carol Dweck, and she talks about a lot of these maybe experiences with these types of perspectives. But I wanted
Yes.
to, in my dissertation, I just tried to take that body of literature on and import it to music lessons because I thought, a lot of this is talking about education in the classroom setting, but in music, we actually have a
Yeah.
very, very important responsibility. And we also probably have the most potential to make an impact on students given that we actually just spend one-on-one time with them. And you probably don't see that often in other fields.
No, you
Not
don't.
in
It's
the
an
same way.
extremely unique thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like a week, every week you have a lesson. You're with your teacher. You develop a very specific type of rapport with them, and they know you so well, and vice versa. You know what I mean? Anyways, so I used all of this literature to just devise just to kind of use it to analyze a few lessons that I had observed. So I have recorded a bunch of teachers teaching undergraduate students and interviewed the students as well, and then uh, yeah, came to some conclusions about how we can shift mindset from a fixed approach to thinking more growth oriented. And I guess it's, obviously my sample size is not super big considering I was the only investigator on this project. And it's probably not super statistically significant, but I definitely noted a lot of things in the lessons as I was watching that was really insightful. To note just how teachers framed things, how they chose the words that they used, and how students responded to that. So,
Well,
go ahead.
no, you go.
Okay, so like I'll give you an example. I think one of the most effective teachers that I had um, been observing, and you could kind of tell in how the student was receiving them. in the lesson and how they were responding to the things they said, they would use a lot of verbs that were like forward oriented, like train or like you need to, yeah, I think one of the ones I used a lot was like you need to train X in order to do Y, and they would say a lot of things that were future thinking, like, you know, um, I can't wait to hear what this sounds like next week, or things like that that I think imparted some type of goal and direction to the student to be thinking ahead. Um, Whereas I think a lot of the time we can get into, as teachers, we can get into like an assessment mode, like like
Yeah.
this was very
Mhm.
good or this was not very good, and I think that that just kind of stops the buck there. You don't really think
Yeah.
ahead other than just assessing what you did at that very moment. Anyway, I thought that was interesting.
That's
Yeah.
that's extremely interesting. And the thing is, like, maybe your sample size for the study was small, but you've seen a lot of lessons, you've given a lot of lessons, and you have a lot of life experience, not part of the project, but you can very quickly see value where it is, even though your sample size is small. So I think that adds a lot of weight to your research, if that makes any sense.
Sure. Yeah.
And then, have you ever thought about taking your findings and making a video series like the one that you talk about learning how to learn? Like, I think that would be a very interesting Udemy course or something.
Yeah. I've never thought of anything
You,
with
you
regards to
should, I really think
vision
you
writing.
should think
Yeah.
about like taking it, scripting pieces, and the shorter the better. Many multiple small parts and insights. I mean, that could be a valuable thing for an educator, especially an enlightened student who wants to kind of figure out how to change their mindset or how to change their inner voice. Like right now with a group of students, I'm doing this the Noah Kakayama course. I think I'm saying his
Oh
name
yeah,
right.
yeah,
The
that's right.
Bulletproof
Yeah,
Musician.
yeah, yeah. The both of
And so he has this like, which is talking about like the mental game of practice and stuff and playing and performance largely. And I'm kind of adapting it to work with these students. And um, I find the material very, very helpful. And I think, if you were to have a similar, like on those things, specifically on mindset, where they're, I mean, that's a very um, powerful book, for example, a very strong example of the genre. And if you've done your dissertation on that and you have these things, even to use the video clips from the lessons, I don't know if you're allowed to do that. Are you allowed to like display those, or are they like kind
no,
of like,
no, I'm
yeah?
not. Yeah, yeah.
But you
I
could
actually totally,
recreate them. You could like
yeah,
you
totally
could we could I could be the student and we could script it, and then you could be the teacher and I'll do the thing, and you can say the things,
act it
so
out.
we can yeah, we can act it out. And but I think that would be a great tool, of
You know,
course.
I've never actually thought about doing anything like that with it. I have given lectures on it before, like at some universities and stuff like that, and talked about it a bunch. But that's basically as far as it's gone. Maybe like the handful of times that I've.
Yeah, no, I think, people are hungry. People are hungry for this kind of information. I'm hungry for this kind of information, and have it come from a good source and have it well produced. And it's a doctorate work. I mean, God, it'd be a
Actually,
lot
you know what?
better.
While I'm on the topic, I just want to maybe mention the most significant article that I had read on it. And I think that this one is very important as a teacher, but also very important as a parent. So they were Carol Dweck and I think the other researchers, Kyla Heimovitz, they were confused, or they had hypothesized that whatever a parent thinks, how their mindset is, their approach to learning, should be the thing that's imparted on their child. But they realized that that wasn't the case when they had actually done assessments on both parties. But they eventually did a bunch of other studies and finally concluded that it's not the parents' opinions or the parents' perspective on their mindset that the students adopt. It's how the parents respond to the student in debilitating situations. So if if even if you were growth minded and you had that kind of perspective about you, if your student did something or made a mistake and you responded in a negative way, even just an action, let's say you scoffed or you frowned or something like that, that is the thing that the student gets or your child gets. It's not what you think of it. Even if you say something after it, all they get is the action that you responded to
Uh-huh.
their action with. And I thought that was really interesting. And I thought, geez, well, maybe I'm doing something. And I thought I noticed this about my students when I was, a few years ago. Whenever they'd be at the piano, if they'd make a mistake, they would just look right at me, and I'd be like, they'd stop and they'd just look at me, and I'd be like, wait, why do they keep doing this? I must be doing something with my face, or doing
Yeah.
something, or verbalizing something that I totally subconsciously when they make a mistake. And sure enough, I mean, I think I respond or I react every single time, whether it's just like to shift or maybe like I make a sound or maybe I even like correct them a lot of the time. And I thought, I'm just going to stop doing that. And I'm just going to try to, yeah, I'm just going to try to not react to that kind of thing and only, and then try to like shift how I don't know what I actually ended up doing. I think what I did was I tried to turn any kind of like mistake into like maybe more positive experience generally. And
Well,
I don't know, I think it helps at least. It certainly helps them not be anxious about making a mistake in the lesson.
yeah. I mean, I don't know if we have to make a mistake a positive experience, but I think it's definitely good to have a good poker face or to,
Yeah, I think that's it's hard to
yeah,
articulate, but yeah, that's kind of what I'm trying to get at.
yeah, yeah. I think so. And you notice a difference like when you made that shift?
I mean, I think it's subtle, but I think certainly my students stop doing that. They stop like looking at me whenever they make a mistake. They stop maybe sweating so much about it when they make a mistake. But
Yeah.
I think that's really helpful in the learning process because then we can just kind of take things from there, right?
Yeah. I
About
mean,
them worrying about the
it's
mistake. It's about I made this mistake. Okay, how do I address it now? How do I fix this? How do I work on this?
how do I own it? Like,
Yeah,
or like, yeah. And then what, or even viewing like what is the cause of this? Or like, it's supposed to reacting to it. It's like, and that's one of the things that like the particular thing that like, I'm doing with these from the Noah course now, is dealing with that kind of, react. Well, it's a different thing, but it's tied in like a instead of reacting to a thing, it's more like processing a thing
yeah.
and then dealing with it and working
It's
on it.
like I mean I vaguely remember the course itself, and I remember have you read Leon Fleischer's autobiography by any chance?
No, I
No.
didn't know there was one.
Yeah, My Nine Lives
Great.
or Nine Lives. Um, it's really
Ah,
fascinating. I mean, I love Leon Fleischer. I think
see,
his recording,
that's another book for my bookshelf now. I got to get
yeah,
that.
yeah, his recording of the Brahms Concerti was the only CD in my car for all of undergrad. Anywhere I'd go, I'd always listen to a full Brahms concerti, one of the Brahms concerti. It took me forever to get anywhere. Um, but the book is really interesting because he talks a lot about, and he talks about this in his teaching too, that we kind of have to have three, I think it's three selves. We have the one that's playing the piano, and we also have to have the one that's like thinking. I think it's two or three selves, one that's thinking through everything, and then the one who's an observer, the person C, who is sitting back or sitting over there and observing what you're doing, to have some kind of objective view on what you're doing and being able to adjust based on that view. Because
Yeah,
I mean, such a weird experience being on stage, and if you are too in your head, you're gonna end up psyching yourself out.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's one of the exercises also from the Bulletproof Musician course. That's a great, like, I guess it comes from all these things. Like the thing is, it's a huge body of work, what he's put together, and I'm sure like he's probably interviewed Leon or whatever and gotten these different stories or concepts from different places. And it strikes me because that was back in 2018 when I did the full course. I just kind of dipping back into it again now the last 3 weeks, but I'll get back into it again. But that strikes me as familiar the way you're describing like
yeah,
this viewpoint of like being in several places at once and being able to filter those things out because when you're doing that you're not focused you can't be nervous because you're dealing with like these
exactly.
things. There's just no space for it. So yeah,
Did you
that's cool.
did you have a lot of performance anxiety when you performed, or
I always have extreme performance anxiety
okay,
whenever I perform. But well, I think I mentioned this quickly before. Like, it depends on the music. Like now I found this style of improvisation where like I can do it very freely and happily. Um, and then there's like whenever I have to perform a particular program, just that really affects me just because typically I just don't have those 150 house concerts under my belt where
Yeah,
like
exactly.
because I can count the number of ones that I've done like it's a rather low number, and so um, it therefore the pressure is much higher on those. And you?
Oh yeah, I mean a lot more when I was younger. I used to be incapacitated for like hours before a concert, especially when I was in
Yeah.
undergrad. Tried not to show it, of course, poker face and everything, but
Yeah, I mean, I would do a really good job of not looking scared, but like inside it was just like horrible.
yeah, exactly.
Um, anyway, Olivia is outside the door, so I'm going to have to this will be maybe our point of exit
That's great.
for
Yeah,
today.
that's cool conversation.
Um, it was fun.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that. I missed you the last few weeks,
Oh,
so I'm
likewise.
glad that we're back on track
Yeah.
and we continue again on this pathway.
Awesome. All right. Until
Cool,
next
man.
week.
Take care. Yeah.